All right, good evening. Calling to order the March 29th, 2002 Planning and Zoning Committee meeting. It is currently 6:40 p.m. I'm Darian Martin, the chairperson of the committee. We're going to forego the solemn meditation and pledge because we've already done that. Madam Clerk, can I have the roll call, please?
Roll call. Chair Martin.
Present.
Vice Chair Perella. Member Erbom.
Present.
Member Nickerson.
Present.
Member Lightfoot Ward.
Present.
Also present for the record, Janice Jacoby, Village Clerk, Christy Alou, Village Manager, and Joseph Geller, City Attorney, Village Attorney.
Awesome. We're going to move on to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I'm sorry if I may. Could you take item G4 of the agenda, please?
Okay. All right, so we will remove G4 and move G5 up to the G4 position. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda with that amendment?
Madam Chair, motion to approve with the amendment with the adjustment.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on to approval of the minutes. Do I have a motion to approve our November 9th, 2021 Planning and Zoning Committee meeting minutes?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second that, Madam Chair.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to good and welfare. This is the portion of the agenda where anyone in the audience can come up. You have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and address when you are addressing the council. Does anybody want to come up and speak about an item that appears on the agenda? All right, seeing. For sure, I'll call you after. Yes, we're coming up. We're rolling along. Okay, so seeing no one for our first good and welfare, we'll move on to agenda items. The first one being G1, garage conversion variance for 411 Northwest 87th Street. Can I have city staff come up and also northeast, so it's not northwest. Okay. Okay, awesome. Awesome. So I guess that is an amendment. It's 411 Northeast 87th Street. All of the documents are correct. It just appears incorrect on the agenda. So can I have the city staff come up and also the applicant, please? Thank you so much. City staff is going to give us a bit of a rundown, but I did speak to Camila earlier, and though the suggestion is denial, it's only because there are no windows, and I think the applicant is willing to cure that. Is that correct, Camilla?
Hi, yes.
Yes.
Good evening, committee
evening.
members. Yes, that is correct.
Awesome. And as the applicant, I just wanted to make sure that you understand that the recommendation for tonight is denial based on the lack of windows, but you are amenable to adding the windows and maybe have some new plans to show us as well?
Correct. So originally I didn't want to put windows. It
Okay.
was costly, but since you guys want the windows, so we will be putting windows. I have drawings here of what it will look like.
Awesome. I'd love to see it. And I think you'll love the windows. You let the light in. All right, here
We
you
have
go.
beautiful streets.
There you go. You
we
want to
actually
see
And you
that.
have the peacocks passing
We
by on your property.
we're actually
All the
gonna
time.
have a large. We can have a large bay windows
Uh-huh.
on the west side.
Yeah, I think that sounds absolutely lovely, and there seems that there's a middle ground. So though we possibly, staff has recommended denial, I think that with this amendment, Camila, the plan is to bring them back to the next council meeting with the amendment?
Yes, in the next council meeting, they can present the application and the plans incorporating this amendment. And for the record, just our recommendation comes from the design guidelines that were recently adopted, and having openings facing the public street is a highly recommended.
Awesome. So at this point, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing, just in case anyone in the audience wants to speak on this item. Do I have anyone that wants to come on up? All right, seeing none, I'll go ahead and close public hearing, but I'll open the conversation up to the council members, to village members, council members, and village staff to see whether or not we have any additional comments, and if anyone is moved to move the item to be though denied, moved to the regular council meeting. So does anyone on the council have a comment about this?
Madam Chair, if I may.
Sure.
Madam Chair, I move that we move this to the council meeting with the adjustment for approval, with the recommendation from Proserbia, and I have complete faith that by the council meeting that we'll see those adjustments rightfully. So I make a motion to move this to the full council meeting with the changes that are due to take place.
Perfect. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Awesome. Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call?
Roll call. Member Lightfoot Ward.
Yes.
Member Nickerson.
Yes.
Member Erbaum.
Yes.
Vice Chair Perella.
Yes.
Chair Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-1.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So
You have a good one.
So next time we meet, and I'll have to bring you the drawings. Is that correct?
Perfect, yes.
Is
That
that-
is exactly it, just
Okay.
with some windows.
Okay.
Yeah, and you're good
Thank
to
you
go.
very much.
Just remind him of the exact
The
date.
second time they would let us, I
Just
would let
remind him
them
of the
know
date.
through
Uh,
you because it has to be
Madam Clerk,
advertised.
could you remind him of the date of the meeting?
Well, I have to see because it's based on the advertisement.
Okay.
So based on the advertisement, I will send Camila, and then she will send you that information when you have to be here.
Either way, you
For the
will
next
know.
meeting.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah, you
awesome.
will.
Have a good one. All right, so let's
Thank
move
you.
on over to G2, garage conversion for 488, hopefully Northeast 90th Street. Can I have the applicant come up, please? Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I may, real quick, Madam Chair.
Sure you can.
Madam Chair, I would just like to say, most likely, just a tentative date, most likely,
tentative
that
date.
that meeting's going to be on Tuesday, April 26th, which is the fourth Tuesday of April when we have our full council meeting. So, all right. Thank you.
Awesome. You have a good one. I'll ask you to state your name and your address for the record, although I've stated your address, but just go ahead.
The address is 488 Northeast 90th Street, El
Oh.
Portal.
Okay, and Camila, you guys are recommending approval of this, and if you could just give us a brief background as to why you're recommending approval, and then we can move on.
Yes, absolutely. This garage conversion, well, I don't know if we allow the applicant to present the application, but our recommendation is just based on the removal of the garage door, and they're going to be installing windows that are consistent with the existing windows in the facade, and the space is going to be converted into partially a fitness room and partially a terrace facing the rear of the property.
A covered
And
terrace in the back.
Based on these changes, we think that it's compatible and consistent with the village, and we can support this garage conversion.
Awesome. Does the applicant have anything that you would like to add?
No, that was
Okay.
everything within it.
Sounds awesome. I'll open up public hearing. If anyone in the audience has something that they would like to add or comment on, now's the time. Okay, hearing none of that, we will go ahead and close public hearing and open up the discussion to the council members and village staff. If anyone has a motion to go ahead and accept Camila's representation,
To
that would be great.
say, because I'll hate those doors to go, the garage door to go, because it's so nice, but I understand that the windows matches. Now, what I saw was like, they're talking about moving the brick of the garage to another second parking on the
Yes,
house?
thank you.
What is it?
When there's a garage conversion, we need to make sure that there's enough space within the site to park at least two vehicles, or have at least two parking spaces. In this case, there's an existing driveway in which there is the driveway, the approach is 17 feet, I believe,
Yes.
which is greater than what is permitted. However, they're not changing the driveway. They are moving the pavers in front of the garage to fill in and repair portions of the existing driveway, which already accommodates two parking
Two
spaces.
parking spaces.
Yes.
So they're not modifying the parking space, it's staying the way it is? I
Yes.
mean, yeah, okay,
Correct.
okay.
Look out for your doors. Councilman Perella wants your doors.
Yes.
He wants your doors. Guard them.
We stay within context of the Mediterranean
It looks
style,
beautiful. It's
so-
amazing.
Thank
Your
you.
house is lovely. So do we have a motion to go ahead and
Ma-
accept staff's recommendation?
Madam Chair, I have a motion to approve and move to the full council meeting, Madam Chair.
Awesome. Second.
I'll second.
Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Roll call. Member Lightfoot Ward. Member Nickerson.
Yes.
Member Erbaum.
Yes.
Vice Chair Perella.
Yes.
Chair Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I want to visit your fitness studio eventually. Looks lovely. All right, we'll move on to item G3, change of use for 190 Northeast 90th Street. Can I have the applicant come up, please? And would also Love staff to give us a briefing on this. I think we all know that it is currently a multifamily, I think 5 or 6 units?
6 units, yes.
6 units. And the applicant is seeking to convert this into an inn. So Camila, could you just give us some background?
Yes, this application is, as you just mentioned, is an existing 6-unit, 1-story building, and which currently counts on the parking within the village right-of-way to satisfy requirements, and the applicant will continue to do so. Because it's a lodging use, it requires half a space for every 2 units, and there are 5 parking spaces, which is sufficient to fulfill there's 1 additional space to fulfill the requirement. And the use is permitted by right in Zone 4, which is 2nd Avenue. And so we can support this change of use request.
This change of use is only, is it only supported because they can do this by right? When we think about where we see the village going, like, do we see or do we desire to have a string of inns popping up? Like, does that conform with what the charrette says and what our plans are for growth?
The charrette calls for 2nd Avenue to be a commercial mixed-use street, main street. And it does permit lodging uses with at most 12 units, 12 lodging units to be occupied, of this use to be permitted in this corridor. So in that regard, in the sense that it's permitted and it's consistent with the commercial vision for this street, yes.
Okay.
But if the applicant would like to add more of your intent with the inn, it would help clarify.
I mean,
the use.
yeah, I mean, the reason we actually purchased this building is we had that vision in mind, right? To turn it into an inn and have, some potential corporate housing, and we're actually in the process of making it a lot nicer at the moment.
Oh, I drove past today. I saw that there's a lot
See
of
the
work.
roof?
There's a lot of work happening. Do you have any renderings of exactly what it is that you think this might look like at the end, or?
I do on my phone. I did not print those out. If
Okay.
that's something that you want to see.
Okay, I'll give you a minute. I'll open it up to public hearing if anybody else wants to speak on this item. Hearing none, I'll go ahead and close public hearing, open the conversation up to the council members and village staff. Does anyone else have any input on this?
Madam Chair, if I may?
Sure.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking along the same line as you, Madam Chair, because, I do want our Northeast 2nd, just like I want our annexation area on the Biscayne corridor. I do want those areas, there are business corridors, so I do want businesses to be in there and to flourish. I would like to see renderings of how it's going to look, because I do remember a long time ago, many years ago, the cottages, which now the cottages are beautiful. I mean, it's one of the, I mean, it's probably in El Portal on Northeast 2nd, it's probably our most beautiful, on Northeast 2nd, it's our most beautiful, property on Northeast 2nd. But I do want to see that property is also going to upgrade its look. If we're going to do this.
In a big way. In a big way.
If we're going to do that, I do want to see that's going to upgrade its look on Northeast 2nd, because I do want to make Northeast 2nd, beautify Northeast 2nd and make it look better, so.
Does anyone else on the council have a comment?
Yeah, just a comment. So, in light of what we're trying to do with short-term rental ordinances, I would say that this is exciting and wonderful that there's a proper lodging entity coming into the village.
Thank you.
And so I think this is a great addition and exactly in the right direction for what we're trying to do in El Portal. And I wish you luck, and I think it's going to be great. So
Thank you.
Does anyone else have a comment? I don't know that I share your optimism about it. I really would love to see what the outside of this looks like, because there's,
It's in there as well.
okay, maybe you could just, when
yeah,
it
sure.
comes around, you can just show me.
Sure.
Because we all know that there's a wide scope and variation of what inns look like. I know that there are, even if we take a look along the Biscayne corridor, you have some that have been renovated that look amazing, and others that are not so amazing, and I don't know whether or not that conforms with what I think in my mind, in my mind when I look at that charrette, about where the villagers want the village to go.
Yeah, I also have a comment about that.
So I have
because-
trepidations about that. Go ahead,
Yes,
Councilman
because
Perla.
I also have mixed feelings about it, because on the commercial, even though it's, we're trying to, entice people to come into the commercial corridor, what I see is like, it doesn't really add to the village as far as like residents, kind of like enjoying the commercial aspect of Northeast Second Avenue, and just because, there's no shops, there's no bakeries or coffees, and that's what I want to see come into that area. And so the benefits are solely for the owner of the property. Now, the other concern I have is with the parking. I didn't see the plans there. I don't see what you have in plans for, because that parking area is actually not paved.
Right, which
so-
we're willing to do, and this was actually on the,
And I don't know if you know this, but based on our engineers and all of that, so it has to be within like, it has to be like a permeable material that goes in place instead of regular paving.
okay.
So I don't know if it's something that Preservia will have to address with the applicant, but, that's my concern. Like Vice Mayor Anders pointed out, what we're trying to do with Airbnbs or short-term rentals, this is kind of a good option, but I don't see an actual benefit to the commercial aspects of the resident or the village.
Okay, so, I definitely appreciate what you're saying. However, I will say that if you have, an established lodging business, there will be a demand for things like shops and places for them to be able to go, and travel to on foot. And, while certainly, those places we want for the direct benefit of, the residents, a business like this can help subsidize essentially some of those local businesses, like a coffee shop and things like that. When you don't have, you might have a certain group of regulars of residents who attend all the time, but in a village as small as ours, I mean, even just a few people going on vacation could affect that business. The freebie
We will definitely-
is another aspect of a business like this would actually help the ridership on something like the freebie. And then in addition to that, a crowd draws a crowd. So if you have guests at a lodging place like this, using things like the nature trail or parks in the village, I do think that would actually encourage residents to it kind of clicks, oh, there's people using the park, I should use the park too. So I actually think that there is a benefit to having a business like this, even on that corridor, because I do think that it will kind of help with patronage and visibility of residents seeing that people are using those services too. So I would say that.
We will also be definitely marketing those businesses around us, such as the restaurants and coffee shops, and, right?
Now, I'm sorry, and you're planning to, of course, utilize all of the units as bedrooms or to rent them, but there's no offices in place, there's no.
No offices.
Right, so it's the same thing. If you're renting to a couple that's a little cuckoo, then there's nobody from the hotel or the inn that's actually an authority there that they can address the issue. It will have to be the village sending the police, so you don't have like a security, you're not gonna have a security
We
in
won't.
place?
However, we have, my property manager is here, and
Okay.
he would be taking care of that. We have noise monitors in each location, So if it goes above a certain decimal level, he's notified of it, and he notifies the guest. If it continues, we got to kick you out. So we're not going to accept any, rowdy guests and
But you're not gonna have any type of security around, not on any type of.
security cameras outside. But
Only security cameras, but not a security
Yeah.
person or anything?
Yeah, correct.
Like a hotel booth?
Correct.
Okay.
I see the economic development argument you're making. I think at this scale, it's hard to support that. I don't know if it's the driving.
It's impossible.
Yeah, I don't think the driving force on someone locating their coffee house is these 6 units. But I also want to make it clear to the residents that are out there, Camila, correct me if I'm wrong, and Attorney Geller as well, there's nothing we can do to stop them from using it as an inn because this is an allowed use.
Correct.
Yeah, by nature of it being zoned in Zone 4, multifamily.
Yes, it's permitted by
Correct.
right.
Okay, and I have a question for Attorney Geller. So I noticed that in the report, I think the parking, or no, setback was one of the things that were not compliant or not conforming.
Because it's existing?
Yeah, because it's existing. So I was wondering,
Yes.
does the change of use impact that aspect? When you're changing the use, do they now that they are changing the use have to abide by that? I think it's a 20-foot setback.
20-foot setback?
Yeah.
Generally, if there's a change to the structure, it would have to abide by, or come closer in compliance to the code,
But not a change of use.
but not a change of use because the building's existing and the use will be converted within the existing structure. And as far as we understand, you will not be altering the structure itself
No,
for this change,
no.
correct?
And Attorney Geller, that's correct?
It would seem to me, and again, I didn't prepare the staff report, but it would seem to me that if the change of use implicates different regulations, for instance, if there is a different parking requirement because of the use, then that would have to be complied with. Now, if there is no alteration to the structure and the other requirements are the same, that's not a problem. But if if, for instance, it was just moving from like a single-family residence to a multifamily, and because of that, it was requiring more parking, then yes, you would have to comply with that. Now, I don't see from what's in front of me that there is a change in that, and if there's not, that's fine. But if the more intensive parking or anything like that,
It was the rear setback. There needs to be a rear setback of
I
a
mean,
minimum of 20 feet.
the rear setback, I don't see why I don't understand why that would be impacted by a change of use. The setback should be the same regardless of the use. But anytime there is a change, if the new use has different requirements, then the requirements associated with the new use would have to be met. Now, I mean, I'll, look to our planning consultant. Is there a difference in the rear setback based on the use that's being changed? I don't know why there would be, but is there?
Just based on the zoning district or the zoning transit. So there's a different setback for Zone 4, but this building was there before adopting the new code. So that's the issue here.
Again, let me say that depending on the purpose that's associated with it, if the new use is more intensive, whether or not the old was grandfathered in before we adopted the new zoning code, this is, if it's a change of use and there is a different requirement for the new use, I don't know that the grandfathering would necessarily apply It is something I probably have to do a little more research on. to be
That is
certain.
super helpful to know, because there are three or four items that I just really want us to, I just really want personally to wrap my head around exactly, when I hear the N, what it's going to be used as, the frequency that you expect of your residents or reservations to come at, and whether or not those things are actually impacted.
I mean,
I think I would need more time to get some more information from Camila and from Attorney Geller on those points, but I'll let my colleagues.
Let me just say, Chairperson, that, again, I don't see why a rear setback would have a different need because of a change in the use. But something like parking, if there's an increase in the requirement for parking because of a change in the use, I would think, again, subject to doing some specific research on not just the change that we've made, but it would seem that in deciding whether to allow a change of use, compliance with the regulations that apply to the new use is something that the council could seek to have done. So I hope that's an answer to your question.
No, that's definitely
Can I
an
ask a
answer to
question?
my question.
Can I ask a question?
For sure, you can.
I mean, it's not like there's gonna be more people in that building than there currently are. The parking right now, people are parking right in front of the building. The only thing we've asked to do differently is to pave it or use whatever material you mentioned before. I'm not sure what it is, but we'll do it.
For the purposes of flood mitigation, so that water can drain, so if it's just asphalt or just concrete, there's nowhere for the water to drain. So permeable materials that allow the water to drain is what we're talking about.
Gotcha. But what I'm asking is related to the number of parking spaces. Meaning, right now, I think you can park more cars there than if you pave it and mark them the way that that the city requires. So it's not like we're really changing the number of people that can park there. It's just that we're actually marking it as a prerequisite to be able to.
I definitely understand. I understand what you're saying. And to me, it's not just about the parking, it's the transiency, it's how often you're going to have new people coming in and out, whether or not the persons that live next door or around this area, I guess it would be a personal preference of mine to live next to a multifamily unit that was rented to 6 people for a long period of time, instead of those residents changing very frequently. I think we might run into the same issue that we've seen with Airbnbs in the village. And I just really want to make a thoughtful decision. I don't think what you're doing is a negative thing. I just want to make sure that I appreciate all of the negatives and the positives.
Understood.
And I make a thoughtful decision as to whether or not those positives definitely outweigh the negatives. So this is not saying that what you're doing is a bad thing. I just want to get it. I just want to understand it and make sure that I'm entering my voice and my vote in a way that settles right with me, right? So this is just the fact-finding process. So with that being said, I'll open it up to Mayor Nickerson. I know that you had a comment.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. A few minutes ago, Clerk Jacoby came up to me and she said, Mayor, she said, isn't this change of use? She said, isn't it that we have to have two hearings for this? And I said, I think you're right. And so I went back and I pulled up our last change of use. That was a change of use in the business district, and it was when the school was going to come into the sanctuary. And right here in that document, this is from May 2020. It says approval of this agreement at 2 public hearings. So the difference is that everything that we did before, like all the homes that we did, it was this hearing, which is a committee, and then we moved it to the full council. This needs 2 public hearings at minimum at this committee level. So, so even if it passes today, it would need to come to the next committee planning and zoning meeting and pass there, then go to a full council meeting after that. If it doesn't pass today, then it has to go to the next 2 planning and zoning committee meetings, whenever they take place, and then a council meeting after that, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Just so that we know how long or short of a process this is. So I appreciate that context, Mayor Nickerson. With that being said, does anyone else on the council have a comment? Go ahead, Vice Mayor Erbaum.
On the issue of the setback, so 5 feet is a setback, is that correct?
Existing.
now, yes.
Existing.
Yes, existing.
I mean, current code. Current code says,
Oh, no, 20.
20.
oh,
20, because the current code for Second Avenue, it calls for a building in the front and then parking in the rear
Okay.
to accommodate the
okay.
usually larger
Okay.
parking.
I was thinking
greater
on the
parking
side, okay.
requirements. Yeah.
All right, I was on the wrong reference
And this
there.
building also faces north. And if this were, a completely new building, it would be ideal to engage Second Avenue.
Mhm.
This is an existing building that is facing the north.
Okay.
And so that's,
Yeah.
exactly, it's a residential.
And then
building.
I might have one question for you would be, at any point in looking at the property to purchase and then purchasing and then with the plan you have in mind, at any point, do you believe that you would be going up in terms of addition, building up?
I would love to,
Okay.
but it's obviously not something that we can do right now.
In terms of cost and things like that?
Yeah.
Okay. So, so also keep in mind that if or when that did happen in the future, additionally, that would be another trigger for bringing any grandfathered situations up to compliance with current
That
code
would be a
as well.
trigger, meaning I would have to.
Yeah, all your
abide by those.
grandfathers would expire at that point.
I see.
Beca-
Okay.
yeah. So just keep that in mind as
So
well.
basically, you would have to tear down the entire building. and
It's,
start over.
well, at least 20 feet of it. So-
Right.
Right, that's
So,
that's the issue.
there you go.
And if I may,
Sure.
Councilperson Martin, this use is permitted by right, which is different than the special exception uses that do require additional hearings because they're not permitted by right. And so that's why this is different in that regard. And also, you had mentioned that you will not be altering the existing structure, and so essentially, the change that you were going to make is what has been submitted now. If there are additional changes that this definitely needs to be any, intent beyond the parking area to enhance and beautify the site is encouraged, and that can be addressed further
Of course, of
and
course.
Yeah.
reviewed
As-
further.
So I think that is the takeaway of what I want everybody to know, that this is a use by right that's included in our definition of what is allowed in Zone 4.
Yes,
Multifamily.
Yes.
I also think that we should think about what we allow in Zone 4 as far as what we see this corridor becoming and whether or not this falls in line with that vision. So does anyone else have a comment about this or a motion on this item? No.
One last thing, and that's just
Vice Mayor Arbaugh?
in the Keys, you have a lot of boutique hotels that are high end to the luxury end of things. That really, I'm trying to think of an example of where I see lodging as small as this, right? And the Keys is what comes to mind. And so I would just let the council know that I do think that a lodging business like this in a small scale does have a potential to elevate the Northeast Second Corridor and El Portal. So that's my last comment, I promise.
Okay. I will also say to that the Key is a tourist destination, and El Portal is a bedroom community. It's people, single-family houses, multifamily, long-term rentals. There's just something different about that, and I just want us to be thoughtful about how expansive that definition is of multifamily, because we definitely know high-end inns, but we know the converse of that. We know what inns look like that are dilapidated and used for purposes that you don't want in your community. So we need to think about both ends, and I'm sure from the renderings that you show, like, it looks snazzy, it looks great. Just want to make sure that it continues to look like that, and we think about whether or not we want to see a ton of inns popping up along that corridor.
I was gonna just about say that, because next to that property, you have another 3 buildings that are exactly like that. It's
Precisely.
suitable for lodging. There's one across the street with 14 units that just came up to the market for $1.7 million. So it has 14 units.
And I don't
So,
wanna be the keys.
You know, I don't wanna see that in Northeast Second.
So with that being said, does anyone else have a comment, or would anyone like to move for the approval of the staff suggestion so we can move this along to the next meeting?
Madam Chair, if I may?
Sure.
All right, so I think, so where we're at right now, so we have, they're due to an approval by right, right? So the first question we have to ask ourselves is, even if we're not comfortable with this, and this might be something for Attorney Geller, even if we're not comfortable with this, if they're rightfully due for an approval.
No, they have to, I think they have to get it.
But that's what I'm saying, but we're not comfortable with it, then for it to even come before us is merely a discussion in a sense, because if they're rightfully due for an approval, then we must approve. I still would like to stick to change of use should deserve 2 hearings prior to moving to a full council. But if they're due for right to approval, I don't know.
I think that this also highlights an issue, though. Like, do we want to look at that multifamily definition
that was going my
to
second point.
preempt
Yeah.
this, like, keys
Yes.
in the village? Like, do we want that? And if not, then we probably need to look at that.
Yeah.
I do think, and Attorney Geller can give us more direction. I am not the attorney for the village, so I can't speak as to them being afforded this change of use by right. I'll let Attorney Geller speak to
Well,
that.
I'll certainly look to our zoning consultants as well, but as a general rule, unless there's something here that's unusual, a special exception, which this is a special exception. And those are not typically by right. A special exception, unless there's something else at play, is discretionary with the village, and it's not a use that is allowed as of right. It's a use that's allowed if the village council, in its discretion, sees fit to grant it. Is that
Yeah,
what
we
we're
need
talking
to,
about here?
yes, we need to clarify, because there's 2, like you said, there's 2 things at play here. The use is permitted by right based on the Article 3 uses table in the form-based code. However, when the application, recently we approved an application for, to modify how all the applications requiring council approval were processed in the village. And that is what specified that any change of use, and we can share this application. It's actually up in the village website, which is what every applicant uses when they need an extensive zoning review, and it can't just be a quick site improvement. New uses or changes of use are to be processed as special exceptions, which is why even if in Article 3 uses table, an inn is permitted by right, these applications that are changing the use within 2nd Avenue and east of the tracks in Zone 5, they will come before the council and will require approval after planning and zoning and the council hearing, and an opportunity to appeal should there be denial in the council meeting.
And the other thing I wanted to clarify, besides the fact that this is, the application itself says it's a special exception. You really have 3 options, not 2. Yes, you can vote to approve, which would pass it to the next reading. You still have the right at that reading to deny. But if you vote to approve, it passes it to a 2nd reading as a change of use based on what I've heard here. Or you could vote to deny, but you do have a 3rd option, which is to defer. You could defer it until the next planning and zoning meeting if you feel, if there's an unreadiness. Now, I can tell you, people that want to develop don't love deferrals. okay? Because you come in, you want to make your investment, you want to either know that you can move ahead with it or know that you can't if that's possible. But while that is a valid consideration for the developer who wants to invest in your village, you have not two, you have three options. And again, if there's an unreadiness, you have the right to move to defer the action until your next meeting. So I'd be happy to answer other questions, but I just wanted to be clear. Those are your range of options, and it is a special exception, and that implies that there is a certain degree of discretion which you get to apply.
Good to know. With that being said, Vice Mayor Urban.
Do we still have a lasting question regarding whether or not the existing setback is allowable? Or are we saying that
I think that can be answered by Camila sometime within this meeting and the next one.
I'm sorry, Matt.
I believe that Camila was going to give us some definitive information between this meeting and the next one. One.
Right, that's, yep, sorry. Well, yes, just, the structure isn't changing, and so the setback, this is why, the setback and the frontage, on Second Avenue, we require a certain percentage of the frontage to be storefront or to address, especially if you're facing Second Avenue, because they're not altering the structure in any way, it's grandfathered. And however, as Attorney Geller said, the parking requirements and they comply, but these are since they're changing the site and the use, those are the elements of the code that do need to come into compliance with this change.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, with that being said, does anyone have a motion that they want to put out there?
I'll move to
Anyone?
I'll
Going
move-
once?
I'll move to advance this to the second hearing.
So you're moving to accept staff's recommendation?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you have a second on that? All right, I guess the motion fails because there's no second. Okay, all right, so I'll go ahead to move to not accept staff's recommendation and deny the motion. Do I have a second? Deny the application. Do I have a second?
But you don't have to do anything. There was no second. It's already there.
No, this is a new one.
You don't have to do anything. You didn't get a second, so it's already dead.
The second was to approve, to accept staff recommendation for approval. Vice Mayor Urbans.
I'm sorry, did you get a second for that?
No, she did not, so.
So both of them did
Then you have to ask.
defer it.
So it dies for that.
Okay,
Madam Chair, may I make a motion to defer this so we can gather more information? We'll come back to a hearing, the next planning and zoning hearing, whenever it's going to be scheduled.
that sounds great. Do I have a second for that?
Second. I'm sorry.
Oh, go.
If-
go ahead.
Just let me just
Mid-motion.
evaluate it before, and I want to defer to one, but just understand the motion in front of you, is deferring it, defers it for another first reading.
Yes.
I'm sorry, one.
Sorry. Good evening, Council Juan Mullerat, plus Serbia. Just in case I can shed a little bit of light. So the fact that this is a reuse of an existing building, the setbacks really don't change. And I'm going to give you sort of like the big picture of planning, but you won't start to get your assets moving or at least activating, generally. Especially because for the last, 7 years that we worked with you, we've been wanting Second Avenue to move forward. I'm neither for or against, I'm just giving you the big picture. In terms of how it's gonna move forward, I see I'm sort of leaning on both sides. On the one hand, I would like to see Second Avenue to be developed with 2 stories, proper retail on the ground level, right? The vision that we've all come to love and expect since the 2012 charrette. So I see this application as sort of as a placeholder. And my fear is that it's going to be a placeholder that could remain there for a while, right? So your decision should take into consideration whether or not this application is that placeholder that could become a catalyst for other properties to start being activated, or should it be held to its current use until the economics are better for a better project to come along, or for an assembly for an assemblage with the next lot, which would allow for a larger building. But if this is a change of use application, you shouldn't get caught up with the setback. And I do hear you. I'm always thinking about how would I feel if I was the neighbor? The fact is that this is the corridor, right? So this is the Z4. If you are next door to this property, you've sort of already bought into the fact that you're next door to a potential 2 to 3 story commercial building. Again, just to summarize, don't get caught up with the setbacks because this is a grandfathered in structure. Do weigh in on the use, whether it's appropriate or not. I think that's really what is in question. And you still have a second reading, so we could see, potentially you would have the chance to see additional information if you so require from the applicant between now and that council hearing.
Juan, I do have a question for you.
Yes.
As far as just the trends in planning and zoning, do you think that a project like this, or have you seen a project like this be an anchor project that kicks off kind of this large-scale economic development of the likes of what we would like to see in the village of El Portal? Have you seen that, and can you give us some concrete examples so we can look at those developments as well?
I think that this project is not large enough to be able to be called a catalyst. To be fair and honest, I think that we can all see that. But at the same time, we haven't seen anything happening on 2nd Avenue yet. We're still waiting for the church. We're still waiting for a whole bunch of projects. And in part, by the way, is because we don't have water and sewer running through 2nd. We're being held up by the county. And I don't think that we're going to see big projects happening on 2nd until that is resolved. So this would be a placeholder project. I don't think that it would become the catalyst. I think it would activate, it would get you some revenue from taxes. It would be a business moving forward rather than a residential use. But no, to answer your question, I don't think that this is a catalytic project. I think it's a placeholder project for something bigger and better to happen. Question mark, when?
And from what you're saying, there are a lot of factors that are outside of just being open to development. The water sewer is something that's concrete that impacts a business's bottom line, and that they would look at as far as whether or not this was the location they want to locate their business at. So I get that this is a solid project. I just kind of want that to be on the record as well.
No, exactly, and that was my concern as well. If you're saying like, as the lawyer is saying, it's not something, it's still within a special exception. It doesn't mean like it was said at the beginning, by right, they can go ahead and do it. So it's not like everybody else, or we have to then approve every application that comes in that corridor that wants to do, have the change of use to an inn or a hotel, right?
That's correct, and it's something that has become a little confusing, but it's quite simple. For a change of use, if it's not allowed, you can't even come here and send an application. We won't even review it, right? It's like, you're not going to put a concrete plan in the middle of the residential district. We're just not going to consider it. For any other change of use that is allowed within the code, they have to go through a special exception. Why? Because this village and the code, the way that it's written, we all chose to have a significant amount of review to make sure that we kept with the vision and to make sure that we protect the residents. So that's the reason why we're doing a special exception.
And it could be
So-
denied without any consequences.
So I wouldn't call it by right. I would call it, and this is again, it seems confusing, but I think it's very clear once you consider that there are uses that are allowed within each of the zones.
Right.
But to change the use, you need to go through this process to make sure that whatever is proposed instead of what exists today is compatible and it is reviewed deeply or heavily by this board and by the commission on a second reading.
Right.
And let me answer also, if I can further answer your question, Councilperson Perella. The answer is, if you're given discretion, you have the right to exercise your discretion. So when you say, can it be denied without consequences? The answer is, as long as you're within your discretion, yes. Now, because you have discretion doesn't mean that you cannot abuse your discretion. So if you said, we're going to deny this special exception because we wanted this gentleman to show up in a suit and tie and not a T-shirt, that would not be a satisfactory or sufficient reason to deny it. You would have abused your discretion. You can abuse discretion, and that can be a problem if someone takes you to court. But if you have reasons that are legitimate reasons that are within your discretion and don't constitute an abuse of discretion, that's the point of requiring a special exception, so that you have the ability to exercise your judgment. That is why your neighbors put you here. A more concrete example is the setback issue. I don't see being sufficient to be a basis for a denial, because it doesn't seem to have any practical impact when the existing building already has the existing setback. But a parking issue, I'm not saying the building does not comply with parking, but if it didn't comply with the parking that was required for this use, that would certainly be a valid reason. And then the point of the fact that it's a change of use, if you have concerns about the change and about the new use, that's why our planning consultants wrote the code in consultation with you in the way they did to give you that discretion. I hope that answers your question.
This makes sense to me, because it was seeming as though this was more of just like an FYI. Like, you can do it, there's nothing really the council can say about it, because it's allowed by right. But what you're saying, Attorney Geller, makes complete sense. There's a reason why we wanted to make sure that it protected the villagers, that we were given that opportunity to make sure the villagers were protected, because there's something that we can do at this level if we deem this to be a project because of parking and other valid reasons that might not be so desirable in the.
Yes, ma'am. And let
in
me
the
just
village.
say, Madam Chair, so you have a motion
Yeah.
by
To
Member
defer.
Nickerson, the mayor,
Do we
to
have a
defer,
second?
so you should seek a second.
Do we
for
have a
that.
second to defer?
I'll second.
Okay, Madam Clerk, can I have the roll call?
Roll call. Council Member Lightfoot Ward.
Yes.
Member Nickerson.
Yes.
Member Erbaum.
Yes.
Vice Chair Perella.
Yes.
Chair Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, so what's going to happen is we've deferred it, and at the next Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, we'll rehash it, I guess. And in the interim, I suppose we'll speak to Juan and Camila about getting some supplemental information. Thank you so much for
Thank
coming
you.
tonight. Okay, we will move on now to G4, which was previously G5 on our agenda that was distributed. G4 is Resilient Street Studies presentation, and Vice Mayor Erbaum, if you can lead that for us.
Yes, so we've discussed at different meetings in the past, the idea of bioswales and better ability for residents to walk, bike, things like this, and then flood mitigation as well. And so through Pluserbia's efforts, they've essentially termed this whole overarching thing Resilient Streets. And so what I'd like to talk about tonight is a potential phase one of Resilient Streets. So in a potential phase one of Resilient Streets, we would be looking at traffic patterns. And so if I'm not mistaken, Camila, from what we had discussed was the adjustment of traffic patterns in terms of addition of one-ways and things like this. So I was saying that, if instead of having to redo all the streets to accommodate two-way traffic, we could essentially lay less asphalt if we only had to accommodate one-way traffic, essentially expanding the swales, which technically could increase the cost of the village of maintaining the swales or repairing the swales, right? Not necessarily. Anyway, the right-of-ways all still would be there. The right-of-ways would not necessarily change. The existing swales, residents' responsibility for maintaining swales, right, would still exist. The right-of-way would now contain essentially non-asphalt, right? But the idea is that we would use native plants, low-maintenance things, so that there's not really a true addition of cost to the village in terms of maintenance of these areas. In addition to that, provides significant flood mitigation benefits, as well as beautification, as well as mobility in terms of extra room for walking paths, bike paths, things like this. But in phase one here, the idea is that the traffic patterns themselves would be addressed, and that would be through changing some streets to one-ways, and thereby essentially confusing outsiders. So people trying to use the village as a pass-through when traffic gets thick and things like this. The idea is that they are frustrated by the traffic pattern or confused by it, and therefore don't use residential streets as cut-throughs at high speed and everything else. So in a nutshell, that's what I believe we're going to discuss tonight, is that kind of phase one. In that, I do believe something like a traffic study will come up for discussion, and so I know we have other issues that we want traffic studies for. So yes, there would be a cost for a traffic study, but in this discussion of a phase one for Resilient Streets, I think that the addition of another benefit of having a traffic study could be viewed as a cost mitigation as well, because instead of just getting a traffic study for reducing the speed limit on 87th, Northeast 2nd, or Miami Avenue, if we do a full traffic study, we get that benefit, as well as the benefit of seeing what the traffic is like through some of the residential streets and cut-throughs. So,
Thank you, Councilperson. We are not able to connect at the moment, but we can share this presentation with you afterwards. But you have hit every point that we were going to discuss, and we actually had proposed with a full disclaimer saying that this is not a master plan; it's just a concept study of how, especially the residential streets, which are the ones that go east to west, could be altered in the way that you've said to accommodate more greenery, more vegetation that can help with stormwater retention and can improve safety. And of course, with this, we want to also note the disadvantages of one-way streets, because there are some people, there will be obviously, potentially there will be a lot of concern for people who live in the streets, but you mentioned one of our points to that is that there's local knowledge about the traffic pattern, so that will essentially move heavier traffic flows to the north-south streets, which is North Miami, 2nd Avenue, and actually there's northwest 2nd Avenue next to the school. That's also county maintained. And so it's also harder to redesign these streets because you have to work with the county. And of course, we've looked extensively at designing these streets, but in this case, because the village owns the east-west local streets, there's potentially fewer obstacles to surpass in order to be able to propose these changes. And if they're done in phases, we could work with the stormwater plan to be able to face them, to have a study and face them do the phases so that they could be changed as the sewer is potentially installed in these streets, which will tear them apart anyway. So as we reconstruct, there's an opportunity to bring back a better design, a safer design, and a design that helps with resilience, which is the main purpose of this study in the first place, and why you have brought it up. So we would be happy to share this presentation and consult individually and see if we can move it forward and what we can bring forward to the council. The plan, the main design intervention is a diagonal diverter, which is, they're making these changes in many streets, in many cities, and one of the best examples is Portland. And what they do is you install this diverter in the intersection so that if you're going north, you may only turn right. If you're going south, you may only turn west. And these diverters help with the directions when you convert them into one-ways. And that is one of the potential solutions that we're bringing to the table. And we would love to discuss that further and explore these concepts with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Vice Mayor Erbaum, for kicking this off, and I look forward to seeing that presentation. I think now we are ready to move on to our second and last, good and welfare. Is there anyone out there that would like to comment? I see a lot of empty seats, so I'm seeing that as a no. We're going to move on to adjournment, and I am going to adjourn what is today's date? March 29, 2002, Planning and Zoning Committee
I'll make
meeting.
a motion to adjourn, Madam Chair.
Oh, you have to make oh, good, thanks. I was about to adjourn my own meeting. Go ahead.
Second.
I'll second.
Can't, I already have.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
For the record, it is 7:41 p.m.
Thank you very much.